Snow clung to Daniel's coat as he stepped onto the old wooden porch, feeling the familiar creak beneath his boots. He had imagined this moment for weeks, coming home for Christmas after months of silence, months of work, months of believing. His family missed him as much as he missed them. He pictured his mother running toward him, his father clapping him on the back, his sister pulling him into a hug. He thought his seat at the table would be waiting, untouched, like a promise frozen. In time. But the second he opened the door, everything he expected shattered. The warm scent of roasted chicken and cinnamon should have felt inviting. But instead, the house felt wrong. Conversations stopped. Forks hovered in the air. His mother's smile trembled. His father shifted awkwardly in his chair. His sister's eyes widened with a mix of surprise and guilt. And then Daniel saw Evan sitting at the end of the long dining table, in his seat. The place reserved for him every Christmas since childhood. The place where his grandfather once told stories and where Daniel learned to carve the holiday roast. Seeing someone else sitting there, relaxed and comfortable, struck him harder than any blow. Evan stood halfway, managing a small, strained smile. He looked like someone caught doing something he shouldn't, but trying to act innocent. Daniel saw through it instantly. "Daniel," his mother said softly, her voice shaking, "you're early." But Daniel had arrived exactly when he said he would. He looked around the room, searching for answers in their faces. None came. Only awkward silence and strange tension, like everyone had rehearsed a story and now didn't know how to start it. He stepped into the room, his heart pounding faster with each step. The wooden floor felt unfamiliar. The decorations seemed placed without care, and even the lights felt too bright. It was as if he had walked into someone else's Christmas, one where he was only a guest. His gaze locked onto the small wooden box on the table, the box containing his grandfather's watch. A watch treasured by the family, promised to Daniel since he was a child. And there it was, open in front of Evan, who casually wiped the surface, with a cloth like it belonged to him. Daniel's jaw tightened. A tiny detail, but crushing. It wasn't about the watch. It was about everything behind it. The trust, the memories, the history. Evan handling it told Daniel one thing clearly. Boundaries had been crossed long before he walked in. It happened so fast. His mother began, her voice small. Evan needed help. He spent a lot of time here this year. We didn't want to worry you while you were busy. Busy. The words stung. They made it sound like he had chosen to leave. Like he had traded his family for work and forgotten them. But he had left to support them, to build a better future. And yet somehow, while he worked long nights in a small apartment across the city, Evan was here eating with them, laughing with them, filling the gap he didn't know had grown so wide. His father cleared his throat, looking everywhere except at Daniel. His sister sat still, her face pale, her eyes full of guilt she didn't know how to hide. Daniel understood everything without needing more explanations. Evan didn't just visit. He stayed. He didn't just lend a hand. He became part of the family. And while Daniel was gone, they allowed it. Maybe they even preferred it. The betrayal wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a loud announcement or a painful confession. It was the quiet kind, the kind that slips into your life slowly, unnoticed until it's too late to stop. It happens in small decisions, small conversations, small moments when someone else steps into your role while you're not looking. Daniel felt that slow betrayal hit him all at once, like an avalanche of forgotten details crashing down. He remembered Evan from their childhood, how they were once inseparable, how Evan often envied Daniel's warm family life, how Evan complained about being alone during holidays. Back then, Daniel shared everything with him, even the things he held close. He never imagined those old memories would turn into something painful years later. Evan had always wanted to belong somewhere, and Daniel, unknowingly, had opened the door. His mother tried to speak again, but her words fell apart. "We should have told you," she whispered. Daniel wasn't sure what hurt more, the chair being taken, the watch being handled, or the realization that no one thought he needed to know. They made choices without him. They created a new normal without him. And Evan slipped right into the empty spaces. Daniel didn't realize he'd left behind till Evan finally spoke. "I didn't mean..." But Daniel raised a hand, stopping him. He didn't want excuses. He didn't trust them. Not now. Evan's presence, once comforting in childhood, now felt like a slow shadow creeping over everything Daniel held close. He wondered how long this had been happening. How many dinners? How many stories? How many moments he had missed while working? Late nights, believing his family understood his sacrifice. Daniel looked at them, really looked, and felt something shift inside him. It wasn't hate. It was something quieter but heavier. A deep ache mixed with a spark of anger. Something sharp and restless. It wasn't about the seat or the watch. It was about being replaced. About feeling invisible in a place he once thought would always belong to him. He didn't shout. He didn't demand explanations. He didn't storm out. Instead, he stood silent, letting every emotion settle like dust. The room watched him, waiting to see if he would break or accuse or cry. But Daniel simply looked at the chair where Evan sat minutes before his chair and felt a cold, steady determination grow inside him. If this was the new reality, he wouldn't accept it quietly. He wanted answers. He wanted to reclaim what was his. He wanted the truth behind Evan's sudden rise in his family's life. And beneath all that, something darker stirred, something he had never felt this strongly before. He wanted revenge. Not loud, reckless revenge. Something quieter. Something thoughtful. Something that would make Evan understand what it felt like to have something taken from him, without warning. As the room held its breath, Daniel knew one thing clearly. This Christmas would not end like any other. And whatever happened next would change everything. Because he was done being replaced. Daniel left the house that night, with the snow crunching under his boots. But his mind was hotter than the fire that burned in the fireplace he had just left behind. He walked down familiar streets, yet everything looked different, smaller somehow. Like the town had shrunk while he was away. Each corner reminded him of childhood laughter, shared secrets, and the bond he once had with Evan. Now, every memory felt poisoned, tainted by betrayal. Daniel couldn't shake the image of Evan sitting in his seat, wearing his grandfather's watch, smiling at his family, as if he belonged there all along. The thought churned in his chest, growing heavier with each step. He tried to tell himself that maybe it wasn't as bad as it seemed, that maybe Evan hadn't meant to replace him. But the calm voice in his head was drowned out by anger. He found himself at the old bridge overlooking the frozen river, leaning against the railing, hands tucked deep in his coat pockets. The river was silent beneath a thick layer of ice, yet Daniel's mind raced. The betrayal wasn't something you could dismiss with a breath or a shake of the head. It was deliberate, or at least, it felt that way. Evan had taken his place while he was gone. His family had allowed it. Every laugh, every smile at the dinner table had been a reminder of what he had lost. He thought about confronting Evan directly, imagining the words tearing out of him, accusations, anger, demands. He pictured snatching the watch from his hands in front of everyone, making the family see what had been done. The idea brought a quick rush, almost satisfaction, but it was fleeting. Deep down, Daniel knew revenge that came from raw anger could backfire. It could hurt him more than anyone else. Daniel spent the next few days walking through the town, observing everything from a distance. He saw the coffee shop where he and Evan had spent hours in high school, laughing over jokes no one else understood. He saw the library where they once studied together, and the park where they had raced through the snow, falling into the cold grass, laughing until their sides ached. Now, every memory was a reminder of the emptiness he felt. Daniel realized the town itself felt different, like a living witness to his displacement. Evan hadn't just taken a chair at a table. He had filled the moments Daniel missed while working. Late, growing closer to Daniel's family, hearing stories, creating a presence Daniel could no longer claim. That gnawed at him, sharp and relentless dot at home. The struggle became internal. During the quiet evenings, Daniel found himself replaying every moment with his family and with Evan, dissecting their actions, analyzing what had happened. He wondered if it had been his absence that made it possible. Maybe if he had stayed, if he had answered every phone call, if he had been there for every minor family crisis, Evan never would have slipped in. And maybe, in some ways, it wasn't just Evan's fault. Maybe the family had wanted someone around, and Evan had been convenient. It was hard to pinpoint blame, but Daniel's chest tightened with the need to act, to reclaim something, anything that was his. Despite the swirling emotions, Daniel's mind began to form a plan. He didn't want chaos. He didn't want to destroy relationships, at least not entirely. He wanted recognition, the acknowledgement of what had been taken from him. Maybe he would confront Evan at the table, when everyone could see, forcing the truth into the open. Maybe he would show them how easily someone could step into his role, how quickly a seat could be replaced. The more he imagined it, the sharper the desire grew, a dangerous mix of hurt and control that kept him awake at night. He even pictured scenarios where he'd refuse to sit, forcing his family to notice his absence, to feel the gap he had left behind. Each idea gave him a thrill, yet also a twinge of fear. Could he cross that line and still be the person he wanted to be? One evening, while watching the snowfall outside his temporary apartment, Evan appeared unexpectedly at the door. Daniel hadn't invited him, hadn't expected him. He felt a spike of tension, his muscles tightening. "Can we talk?" Evan asked, voice quiet but steady. Daniel hesitated, but curiosity and unresolved anger pushed him to let him in. They sat on the old leather couch, snowflakes drifting against the window like tiny frozen sparks. Evan looked at him with a mixture of guilt and anxiety. "I didn't mean to take anything from you," he said. "Your family. They needed someone, and I just didn't expect to fit in the way I did." Daniel listened, watching Evan's struggle with his own words. The sincerity was there, but it didn't heal the sting. He realized revenge wasn't just about making Evan feel pain. It was about reclaiming control, asserting that his life, his family, his memories still mattered. For the next few days, Daniel oscillated between plotting and reflection. He drafted confrontations in his mind, rehearsed the perfect tone, imagined every possible reaction from his family. Yet, every plan collided with doubt. Could he hurt someone who, in many ways, hadn't done anything cruel intentionally? Could he fracture his family even more, deepening a rift that might never heal? His thoughts were restless, cycling between anger, hurt, and empathy. Every time he saw Evan laughing with his family from a distance, a part of him wanted to lash out, to show dominance, to reclaim what felt stolen. Another part whispered caution, reminding him that anger rarely fixes anything. The tug-of-war inside Daniel became a daily ritual, consuming his thoughts, shaking his nights with insomnia, and filling his days with restless pacing. The internal struggle was compounded when Daniel reflected on his own role. He had been absent, preoccupied, absorbed in his work and ambitions. He realized that his absence had left a vacuum, one that Evan stepped into, but one that might have been inevitable. He remembered the countless calls he missed, the holidays he skipped, the birthdays he had been too busy to attend. All those small acts of distance had added up. Perhaps this betrayal was as much about his choices as it was about Evan's presence. That realization hit him with a sharp pang of guilt, yet it also fueled his need to act not just for revenge, but to reclaim a sense of belonging that he feared had slipped away for good. The tension escalated until Daniel finally made a decision. He would confront the situation directly, but not recklessly. He wouldn't lash out blindly. He would choose a moment carefully, when the stakes were clear, when everyone could see the truth, and when he could measure the impact of his actions. His mind raced, planning the confrontation, imagining dialogue, anticipating reactions. Each scenario played like a movie in his head, building suspense, raising the stakes, and testing the limits of his patience. He was both the writer and the audience of this internal drama, living every imagined consequence as vividly as reality itself. Yet, as the days went by, Daniel also began to see Evan as more than an intruder. He realized that Evan's presence had filled needs, both his own and the family's, that Daniel, through absence, had ignored. He saw glimpses of Evan's humanity, vulnerability, and desire to belong. It complicated the notion of revenge, turning it from a simple act of retaliation into a moral puzzle. Daniel understood that revenge might satisfy a fleeting moment of anger, but it could also destroy relationships, reputations, and self-respect. This internal conflict became a tension that gnawed at him constantly, making every choice feel like a razor's edge between justice and destruction. By the time Christmas night approached, Daniel's mind was a battlefield. Anger, guilt, empathy, and the need for recognition fought against each other relentlessly. He knew he had to act, but he also knew that the decision could change everything. Every glance at Evan, every laugh, every casual touch on the watch reminded him of what was at stake. He realized that the story of betrayal wasn't just about Evan taking his place. It was about Daniel reclaiming his identity, understanding his limits, and defining what he would allow into his life. The emotional and psychological struggle had reached its peak, preparing him for the confrontation that would soon come, one that would test every ounce of restraint, morality, and courage he had left. Christmas night arrived with a pale light seeping through the frost-covered windows, dusting the room with a quiet glow. Daniel stood in the doorway, his boots crunching softly on the old wooden floor, heart hammering like a drum. The dining room looked unchanged, except for the seat at the head of the table, the chair that once belonged to him now claimed by Evan. The family sat around the table, their faces warm and expectant, but Daniel saw it all differently. Every smile felt like a challenge, every laugh a reminder of the space he had lost while away. The watch gleamed under the chandelier, a symbol of his family's trust, now casually handled by Evan. Daniel's mind raced. He had spent days imagining this moment, rehearsing confrontation after confrontation, planning to reclaim what was his. Now that it was here, the tension was unbearable, almost electric. He stepped closer, each footfall deliberate, a drumbeat of intention. The family watched silently, sensing something monumental was about to happen. Daniel could see the anxiety flicker in Evan's eyes, a recognition of the storm about to break. He reached for the small wooden box holding the watch, fingers brushing the polished surface. Every nerve in his body screamed to grab it, to assert himself, to make the family see the truth. This was his place, his inheritance, his seat at the table. The thrill of imagined revenge surged through him, a rush of power and vindication. He pictured the accusations leaving his lips, Evan recoiling, the family witnessing his pain and his triumph. A part of him craved it, the satisfaction of seeing justice done in the bluntest way possible. But as he held the box, a memory stopped him cold. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. The man who had once said, "Strength isn't shown by striking back, Daniel. Strength is shown by knowing when not to." The words sank deep, clashing with the fire of anger in his chest. Daniel realized that true power might not lie in retaliation. That revenge could satisfy for a moment but leave a trail of regret and broken relationships in its wake. The anger, so raw and consuming, met the caution that had grown inside him over days of reflection. The choice wasn't easy. He could storm forward, demand recognition, humiliate Evan, and reclaim the seat and the watch, or he could rise above the instinct to hurt, choosing a path that required more courage and self-control than he had ever demanded of himself before. He looked at his family. His mother's eyes glistened with worry and love. His father's hand hovered near his glass, uncertain. His sister's face a mixture of hope and fear. Evan's posture stiffened as Daniel approached, every muscle tensed, waiting for the confrontation. Daniel felt the pull of revenge, intoxicating and immediate, but he also felt the weight of consequence pressing down. This wasn't just about a chair or a watch. It was about his life, his relationships, his identity. He realized that vengeance might bring a fleeting satisfaction, but it could destroy the fragile bonds that remained. And yet, if he chose inaction, would he ever feel complete? Would he forgive himself for letting his place, his legacy, be overshadowed without a fight? The moral dilemma twisted like a blade in his chest. Daniel exhaled slowly, letting the fire of anger cool into clarity. He closed the box without touching the watch. "I won't fight for a seat," he said, voice steady, soft enough to draw the family's attention without a scream. "Not anymore. If I have to fight for my place here, maybe I need to ask why. I left it empty in the first place." His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. There was no accusation, no demand, only acknowledgement and strength. His mother's lips trembled as tears welled in her eyes. His father looked down, unsure what to say. His sister stood, rushing to embrace him, silent apologies flowing without words. Evan remained seated, stunned, the tension between them vibrating. In the quiet room, Daniel turned toward Evan, meeting his gaze directly. "I don't want revenge," he continued. "I want understanding. If you needed a family, you found one here. But so did I, and I don't want us to destroy it fighting over who belongs more." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and Evan's eyes flickered with a mix of relief, guilt, and understanding. Daniel realized in that moment that revenge might have hurt Evan, perhaps even satisfied a small part of him, but it would never have healed the emptiness he felt. Healing required more than confrontation. It required honesty, courage, and a willingness to let go of what was lost while embracing what could be gained. Evan finally spoke, voice quiet, trembling slightly. "I never meant to take your place. I just didn't expect them to give me one." Daniel nodded, feeling the tension in his body release fractionally, like ice melting. "Then let's make room. There's enough space for both of us, if we choose that," he said. A small shift occurred. Evan pulled out a chair, not reclaiming Daniel's old seat, but offering one beside his own, a silent gesture of reconciliation. The family exhaled collectively, the rigid air softening into warmth. The meal began, slow and deliberate, each bite shared in the new rhythm of coexistence rather than rivalry. Daniel noticed the small smiles, the quiet laughter, the subtle gestures of inclusion. He realized that the real victory wasn't in the chair, the watch, or the symbolic claim of space. It was in the choice not to act on his anger, not to let the desire for revenge define him. Each word he spoke, each glance he offered, reinforced that he had reclaimed something deeper than a seat. He had reclaimed his integrity, his control, and his sense of self. As the evening progressed, Daniel felt a strange peace settle over him, an unexpected calm after days of internal turbulence. The fire of anger that had driven him now simmered into warmth, a reminder that emotions could be harnessed without letting them dictate action. The room felt alive with connection again, not because old roles were restored, but because he had chosen to create a new understanding, a new dynamic built on mutual recognition and respect. The family, too, seemed to understand the unspoken lesson. Their glances, their laughter, their shared moments carried a subtle acknowledgement. The past was acknowledged, but it would not control the future. Daniel reflected quietly as he reached for his glass. The desire for revenge had been intense, almost irresistible, a force that demanded satisfaction. Yet, in resisting it, he discovered something far more lasting. He understood now that revenge could never rebuild what was broken, could never restore the trust lost in absence, could never heal the void that misunderstanding created. What he could do was choose his response, choose compassion over retaliation, and accept the imperfect reality with strength and grace. The realization was almost dizzying in its clarity. True power lay in restraint, in understanding, and in the courage to prioritize connection over conquest. By the time dessert was served, Daniel felt a sense of completion he hadn't expected. He had confronted his emotions, faced the opportunity for revenge, and chosen a path that preserved rather than destroyed. His grandfather's voice lingered in his mind again, a gentle reminder that strength was measured not in strikes, but in choices. He glanced at Evan, the family, the watch, and the chairs around the table, and for the first time in days, felt home again, not in the space claimed by tradition, but in the space reclaimed by wisdom, compassion, and thoughtful courage. Daniel realized that Christmas had given him more than memories or traditions. It had given him insight. Revenge might satisfy for a moment, but understanding and forgiveness built lasting connections. He understood that some battles weren't meant to be fought in anger, and some victories weren't meant to be claimed through conflict. As he lifted his glass in a quiet toast to the room, he smiled subtly, knowing that he had chosen the harder path, the wiser path, and the one that would keep the family together. That night, Daniel didn't just sit at the table, he belonged there in every sense. Not because he claimed a seat, but because he chose to rise above the instinct to destroy, turning betrayal into understanding, and anger into lasting strength.